Hi, and welcome to KarKix. I'm Bob Lang. A titan of American auto racing is Al Unser Sr. His accomplishments speak for themselves. He's won the Indy 500 4 times. He's won 39 career Indy Car races and is a 3-time series champion. Also of note, the Unser family is the only one to have 3 different members win the Indianapolis 500. And if you count their years of championship racing, it's incredible. The Unser family has been driving, fixing, building, and winning in motorsports since at least the middle of the last century. I can think of no other sports entity that has had a longer legacy than the Unser family. I had the good fortune to talk to Al Unser Sr. at the Unser Racing Museum in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's a beautiful sunny afternoon. We're here at the Unser Racing Museum on Montano Boulevard in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and this is an incredible place. And I'm with an incredible person. This is Al Unser Sr. Al, thanks for having us in, and I'm going to start with a typical question, then we'll try and get into some that are not as typical. My first question is, what's your first recollection of motor racing? Was it your brothers, friends, your dad?
My dad, yeah, he was, raising us in the automobile business in the garage. It was all automatic for us to start realizing that he was a race car driver at one time at Pikes Peak. See, so that is what motivated us to start wanting to drive race cars. And my folks were for it. Daddy and Mom just said, if you want to do it, we'll try to help you as much as we can on knowledge. They didn't have any money. And, people say, well, it didn't cost that much in those days. Well, it did. Just the figure of money was different then. So, it was hard. They helped us as much as they could, and we just loved the sport and went after it.
So where did you first drive a motor car, and who were you with? What was it like, that first non-racing? What was that first driving experience?
Well, it was out on the West Mesa of Albuquerque. In other words, where the freeways are now and the homes have built, that's where we used to run. And I can remember the house and the shop on Route 66 out there. There wasn't anything around us, and there really wasn't. So we kind of had my brothers would just pull them in, and they're the ones that started it all, of wanting to go out and we'd, think we could build a race course. And it was just 2 corners, and we just would take the Model A. Well, I run the thing, for probably, a couple of months. How the Model A came about, I was probably about 9 years old, and I went to my father and I says, Daddy, can I have that Model A out there, pickup? And he looked at me and he says, you get that Model A running and you can have it. And I says, really? Well, 8-year-old kid, 9-year-old kid, come on, you don't know much about anything, So I went to work on it. And it took me, and I couldn't have any help from my brothers. He did say that. He says, you can't have any help from your brothers, nor from the mechanics in the shop. You have to do it. Well, that's okay with me. 8-year-old kid knows everything. I just went to work on it, and I finally got it running. It took me quite a while. It wasn't an easy chore. Well, I finally got it running, and off I went. Man, I was in heaven. I'd run all up and down the dirt roads back there, and there was one corner, and I thought I could run around there wide open. Well, if you've ever driven a Model A, they steer very hard. They're not easy. It's not like power steering in today's cars. And anyway, myself and a friend of mine I got it sideways, and it caught and rolled it. And I'm upside down, and we get out. Neither one of us was hurt. Of course, we wasn't probably going 15 mile an hour, 20 mile an hour, say. So I go in and I get my brothers. I says, come and help me. I wrecked my Model A.
Oh my gosh, what did your brothers say to that?
We're told not to help you. And they finally came out, and we rolled the Model A back over on its wheels, and it really didn't hurt it. I lost all my gas, and all that, but that hurt my feelings. But I sat there and I says, now don't tell Daddy and Mom. Oh, we won't. When my dad and Mom got back from downtown, it wasn't 15 minutes. Al, I walked in and I says, yes, sir. What are you doing wrecking the Model A? Getting it upside down, yes, sir. What did I tell you about that? He just said, well, don't do it again. I'm glad you're okay. And he just brushed it off. He says, don't let it happen again, And that's the way my folks were, As long as I think we were okay and we learned something about what we did wrong, they were okay with it. They were such terrific parents because of that. They just turned us loose. And, later on, we had, or before that, we had donkeys. We used to go riding everywhere out there. And we went everywhere on those donkeys. And my brothers used to strap me on it because I wasn't very big. And I'd fall off and the donkey just dragged me through the cactus, and they just thought that, and my brothers thought that was the neatest thing. It got to be a laughing deal, I guess, with them, because every time they wanted to go ride the donkeys, I said I wanted to go too. Well, I had my own donkey, and they said, well, we're going to strap you on it. If you fall off, we're not going to stop. Well, I don't care. I was for it, and that's just the way I was brought up, and that's just the way they brought me up, and it was a good life. I don't regret any of it. Every once in a while, I'll take a vehicle and try to go out through there. There's fences you can't go through. I can't do it today, so it's hard for anybody to realize the way the four boys were raised out there. My folks, we had certain guidelines. But out of that, we could do what we wanted. And my folks didn't really, as long as we didn't lie and cheat and do things like that, they let us do what we wanted.
So where was your first racing experience? Were you the driver? Was it with your brothers?
Well, there was 5 years difference between myself and Bobby. 6 years difference between Jerry and Louie and myself. So I was the one that was in their way, a younger brother. They, as I said earlier, they used to tell me, if you're going to come with us, if you want to come with us, we're going to kick your tail, if you just behave in any way. And so there was never a doubt of trying to outdo them, because I couldn't, because there was 5-6 years difference in our ages. So the first race, I used to watch Bobby and Louie and Jerry out at what they called Cormant Speedway on Rio Grande. And they started down there, and then they went to Speedway Park out on the east side, clear against the mountains over there on Eubank. Then that's where I started, was at Speedway Park on Eubank. And by that time, my brothers were gone. Jerry was in Hawaii racing. Louie was in California working on motors and racing himself, sprint cars, and Bobby was doing the same thing. So when I started racing out here in '57, that's all that was out there was Speedway Park. There weren't any houses around it. It was out to the other side of the base, and there wasn't anything there but us out there trying to race. And it was really fun. It was educational. I learned a lot, and that's what taught me. And then the drivers in town didn't like a little kid outrunning them, so they started ganging up on me and blocking me and spinning me out. So my dad got mad and he said, Bobby, I'm going to buy you a car, and you and Al will be running against them. So we thought that was a heck of an idea. Well, between Bobby and I, we just kicked their tail out there. We really did. And the guy that was most honorable towards helping me out there was a guy named Buddy Taylor. That Buddy Taylor, he says, no more picking on Al, you know. And by that time, you know, things were kind of turning, and it was with Bobby and I out there, we ganged up on everybody else. And then it was a different days in those days, because you would come into the pits after a race and you had to have pretty big pit men, because the fight would start, you know. They didn't like, or we didn't like, you know, and so we started recruiting big men, you know, and we'd just go out there and say, you guys want to fight, let's have at it, because that's the way we were raised, say, you know, fairly and honestly. And today that just doesn't happen. You know, you do something like that today and you're talking to an attorney instead of a guy's friend or his father or his mother, you know, so it's different today.
There is a strong perseverance streak in the Unsers. I think a lot of parents out there would like to know, what did your folks teach you? Now, there were tough times, like when your Uncle Joe and your brother Jerry, they were the first Unsers to attempt Indy. Both were fatally injured. What did your parents instill in you to give you guys the perseverance to continue to grow and become champions?
My folks, that's what's the good part about our folks. They just, Daddy and Mom were when Jerry got injured and killed at Indianapolis, they had a little meeting with us, and we sat down and they said Jerry was doing what he loved. He was racing and enjoying life, and we want you to continue, you boys continue, Louie, Bobby, and myself. If that's what you want, we will not discourage you in any way about auto racing. We love the sport. That's still our life, our business, and working on cars. So you guys do what you want to do. And we just continued. We honored Jerry as a brother that loved what he was doing, and we hated to lose him, but you know, things like that happen. If you lose one of your relatives or your son or your daughter out on the highway, do you quit driving? No. So, you know, and we didn't quit racing. We just carried it on and wanted to make Jerry's life realize that we're paying him back for every time we won a race, you know, that they took one of our brothers.
Now, competing for seats with racing teams had to be hard. Aside from winning races, how did you pitch yourself into a seat on a racing team, and what time in your life did that start?
I can tell you that in 1957, when my dad, we put the super modified, they were called then, together, and we went out to Speedway Park, I won everything that night. I set fast time. I mean, I was a rookie. I won the feature. I won all the races that they entered me in. And the prize money, you know how much it was? $7. My dad said, he was really neat. He says, you go up to the pay window because you did it. So I go up there, you know, I'm thinking, man, this is going to be pretty good. They handed me $7, and I brought it back to my dad, and I handed it to him. I says, here's what we won, Dad. Yeah, good, okay. He just put it in his pocket and never said a word, never complained about being, that's all we won. I mean, he was such a neat father, because he paid more than fuel, and fuel in those days, gasoline was only, 25 cents a gallon. Between the fuel and the pit passes, I mean, it was way more than $7. So just think of the drivers that run behind me. I mean, they didn't win enough to even, they didn't deduct me because I was young, I guarantee you, because my father wouldn't let that happen. You know, so it's a different story. And then you go through all those days, and then you finally get to Indianapolis and start running, say, sprint cars and stuff, USAC cars, and all of a sudden, you know, you do pretty good one night, and you know, you get $300 or $400. I mean, it's just remarkable. And one time I went to Phoenix with my super modified, And we didn't win the race. We won third or something like that. And I didn't make enough prize money to pay my fuel bill going down and coming back and buying alcohol for the race car and tires. And I had to come back, and luckily I had an American Express card and I was able to buy gas. Otherwise I wouldn't have made it back. And I thought I did pretty good that weekend at Manzanita Park with the super modified, but in those days they just didn't pay that kind of money. The crowds wasn't there, I guess. I don't know. I went the same way at Pikes Peak. I went up there and crashed one year, and that was in 1963. And when I left, I didn't have any money. In time, I paid my motel bill, my tire bill, my eating, and all that. I didn't have any money. I was broke. I left Colorado Springs with 50 cents to my name and 3 kids. And I'll tell you what, it was too much, you know, but I made it back because I had a credit card, thank goodness. And I got back and opened up my business again, and went broke there a couple of times. I mean, life's a funny deal sometimes. Very stupid too, you know, because I was 19, 18 years old running a business and going out and racing. And I mean, I didn't know what was going on.
What was the transition to Indy Cars like?
Well, you know, Bobby, my brother Jerry was already at Indianapolis and got killed. And then Bobby went, and he was having a hard time crashing. Bad luck, I guess. I don't know why. But to make the transition from super modifieds and sprint cars and midgets and go to the speedway cars, you know, I went to Phoenix one time on the mile dirt track and run an offie down there for a USAC show. And I thought I was in another world, and I really was, because I'd never gone that fast down a long straightaway. The mile racetracks, you really run fast down the straightaways. So, you know, things like that you do, and you learn your mistakes, and you try to keep getting rides. I didn't have the money to have one of those cars or to go to Indianapolis. And I finally, you know, went to Pikes Peak and won Pikes Peak. And while I was up there, before the race that I won up there in '64, a guy named Frank Arciero was running the sports car up there for Bobby, had a car. And I asked Frank for a ride after, you know, going to SCCA races. And Frank looked at me and he says, "I only hire winners." He says, "Have you ever won a race?" He's talking about big races, you know, Pikes Peak or a championship, you know, Indy car race or something. I said, "Well, no, sir, I haven't." He says, "Well," he says, "you have to first start winning before I'll hire you." So I said, okay, you know, kind of went my own way, and I happened to win Pikes Peak that year in '64. The next day, boy, I walked up to him and I said, "I'm a winner now. Can I have a ride?" He says, "I'll tell you tomorrow." He was a Italian accent. He says, "I'll give you an answer tomorrow." I said, okay. So the next day, we were still up at Pikes Peak, and I went to him. I said, "Well, Mr. Arciero, what do you say?" He said, I'll give you a chance." So that's how it started right there. And then later years, he's the one that took me to Indianapolis from my rookie year in '65. He wanted to go back there again. He was back there one other year with a Maserati engine and didn't make the race. So he says, "I still want to make the race, you know, with the Maserati engine." So we put a car together with the Maserati engine. Well, the Maserati engine didn't have any horsepower. That's why it wouldn't, you know. And so I didn't make the race with that car, and I'm sitting on the wall or in the garage area. I'm sitting there with my head between my legs because I thought I was through. And in those days, if you missed the race at Indianapolis for not qualifying fast enough, the car owners never did want you. because they didn't figure you had the talent. Say, so boy, I was wiped out. And AJ Foyt walks in my garage and he says, I got us another car, and he says, if you'd like to run my backup car, come over to my garage, which was right across the hallway from where I was. Well, when he walked out the door, I was glued to his back, I guarantee you. I mean, he didn't have to, walked in there, and he says, okay, he says, let's go out and run. And I went out in Lola, rear engine Lola race car, run 10 laps, and I came in. We went back to his garage area and we're sitting there, and he walks up to me and he says, we're going to go back out to qualify. I thought he was kidding. I mean, I was shook. And I'll never forget, he got up and walked out. He says, come on out, we're taking the car out now. And from that garage area to getting out to the racetrack, I don't still remember today because I was so shook. I mean, you just can't imagine. I only had 10 laps in the car, and he wanted to qualify the car, And it was the last day of qualifying, so it was do or die deal. So I had to go out and went out. He told me what to do, and I listened to him and did what he told me to do, and we made the race. I started 32nd, but the last day of qualifying didn't make any difference. And I ended up that weekend and running ninth position. And that seemed to open my career up. Then the next year, nice things started happening. I run for Team Lotus. And then from there, just we kept going up. And so in 70, I run second there in 67 and stuff. So they finally won the race in 70. Yeah, you have to remember that when I was coming up, I looked at drivers that I honored. They were my idols. Foyt, Hurtubise, McElreath, Parnelli Jones. I can just keep running off names that was my idols. I could look at them and say, gee, if I could just be like them. And all of a sudden, you get the right brakes and you're running against them. You think, man, this is absolutely beautiful. And then you're starting to outrun them. That's when things really start changing. And I think you find out they're just as human as you are. They're able to be outrun just like you are. And it just was a treat to be able to run with them and then start outrunning them, and you sit back and you say, gee whiz, I'm a lucky person.
Now, your last win at Indy was as a fill-in driver for Penske when Ongais crashed and they wouldn't release him from the hospital. You then won the ride back at Penske.
Well, somewhat. In other words, when that happened, Danny Ongais was not released from the hospital because of a concussion. Then I got in the car and ended up winning the race, qualified the second weekend and stuff. And it was a year-old car and a year-old engine. But when you run for Penske, you know that you get the very finest that there is, And so when he called me and asked me if I would run for him with a year-old car, year-old engine and all that, I said yes right away. And I turned down probably 5-6 teams before that because I didn't think they had the capability of winning. I'd already won the race 3 times, so you learn to understand what goes on. And so when Penske called me, I said yes right away. And it ended up being, one of those golden days, of being able to win the race. And then later Rick Mears got hurt. And then I did replace Rick then in the team, and we won the championship, and it was just a golden time in my life. They say, well, which is your most famous race? And there's so many, but your last win is the one you remember.
The crazy life of a professional race driver. What were the craziest times or the weirdest times you can remember?
Oh, I don't want to get into that. I mean, but anytime you crash, we all crashed. And you're just sometimes very lucky to be able to come out of them. A lot of drivers didn't. They get injured and killed, and or laid up for life. Joe Leonard crashed in Ontario, California, and he couldn't come back to racing. And there's a lot of drivers that I could name. Jim Hurtubise crashed at Milwaukee, caught on fire and burned real bad. But he still continued racing, but he wasn't near as competitive as he was at one time. So you thank goodness, thank the Lord for taking you through all this and able to get out of the cars. I crashed at Texas World Speedway one time, and there's still 2 weeks of my life I don't remember. I mean, I had a very severe concussion, and that was in 1978, in fact. And I mean, I don't even remember to this day. And, things like that happen in your life. But fortunately, I was one of the drivers that was lucky enough to come out of it, and I'm still here today.
Your son, Al Unser Jr., has been an incredible competitor. And I can only imagine how proud you were when he won the Indy 500, not once, but twice. I think it was he, little Al, that I used to watch in the 70s run a go-kart full wide open at a go-kart track up here on West Central Avenue, Route 66 to the rest of the world. That was back in the 70s, but he was amazingly fast. And I say that as a young go-kart racer myself. I never saw anyone faster in a kart. Was that him?
That was him. No, that's how I started him, was at the go-kart track they called it Triple T Cartway out on West Central, just past 98th Street.
1994 was definitely his year. Incredible driver. Never forget. I even had a piece of his crashed Detroit car that I kept in my garage for years. But what an amazing driver little Al was. You, your brother Bobby, and your son Al Jr. have cemented a place in racing history. But the Unser line of drivers doesn't end there. Bobby's son Robbie is a 9-time Pikes Peak winner. And I think that ties the old man on the mountain, the old man of the mountain. And he's an Indy Race League driver, drift racing, Formula D. He's done a lot. His sister Jerry, another go-fast go-kart driver, and I think she's the first female Unser to win at Pikes Peak. Johnny Unser, your nephew, Jerry's son, finished 18th at Indy. He's a driver coach and Indy official. Then you've got Jason Tanner, your grandson. He's following the tradition in sprint cars, all in the states around the Southwest. Al Unser III, aka Just Al, is Rookie of the Year in the Skip Barber Series. He's regularly finishing in the top positions in pro racing, in the Pro Racing Series. What's the future of Unser race drivers?
Well, the grandkids, most of them that came along, thought that they should automatically win because their name was Unser. Well, it didn't take long for them to understand. They say, why can't I win like you guys did? And I tell them, well, you got to first want to and work at it. You're not working at it. You think it's going to happen, and it doesn't. As I used to tell Al Jr., I'd say, you put your pants on just like everybody else. The day that you think you put them on better or differently is the day you're going to fail. We're all the same humans, and you have to create yourself and work hard to become good at what you're doing. And he always took it like that, and the grandkids didn't seem to want that. A couple of them did. Robbie did to a certain extent. And Al the third, Al's boy, we thought he had a ride this year. They thought they had a deal going, and it didn't work out. So he still wants to run, yeah.
Well, he seems to have the right perseverance attitude, so if he stays with it and keeps working at it, he's bound to be another Unser champion.
That's right. No, that's good.
Talk about fast company. A.J. Foyt, Rick Mears, Bobby Unser, Johnny Rutherford, Emmo Fittipaldi, Mario Andretti. Who was the best driver, I should say the hardest to beat? After you, of course.
I'm sure glad you added that, because that's a hard thing you're asking, because what happens is every week is a different race at a different place. If you were racing at one time every week, then you could sit here and say, well, this guy or that guy is the best that there is. But when you take clear across the United States, and try to pick out the very best, it's hard. Every person you just mentioned are good. At a given time, they're the best. I mean, Bobby, Mario, Foyt, Parnelli Jones. I mean, you can just, Jim Hurtubise, who should have won the Speedway. Jim McElreath, who should have won it. Lloyd Ruby. I can just name you names that on the given day, those guys were the best that there was. So to sit here and say this guy or that guy, I can't. I gotta say all of them, and I mean all of them. Regardless of whether you like them or you don't like them. At that given day, you couldn't outrun him, so he was the best.
That has to be the best answer to that question ever. What keeps you busy these days besides this fantastic museum?
Well, Sue and I have a place up in Chama, New Mexico, and it's up in the mountains, and I love the mountains, and there's hunting, fishing. I don't do any of that anymore, but at one time I did. And I just love going up there and spending time up there, and then the museum here just keeps us going, and it really does. We got a good manager here now, Janet, who we think the world of, and she does a terrific job for us. So we're able to kind of get away and relax, and Sue and I enjoy. I got snowmobiles, I got ATVs, and I go up in the mountains and get away from it all, and it's just wonderful.
Do you have any advice for any young people who would like to be race drivers?
I would say to the younger generation, to if you want to become a race car driver, it's not just saying that you're going to become one. You got to work at it. You have to concentrate. You have to learn what things are about, and the knowledge that you can learn by going and watching car racing. And maybe you haven't started driving yet, but at least watching and understanding and seeing what the guys are doing out there, the people, men and women, are doing, I think is very, very good and very important. So if you're going to want to become a car racer, work at it, do it. There's only one place that you want to be, and that's number one. And to get number one is very hard. It's very difficult. So I say to you, to just get it and hold on and try to understand what you're doing. And if we can help you in any way at the Unser Racing Museum, we'll try to help you as much as we can.
Whether you're a fan of IndyCar racing or not, I think you got something you can take away from this interview with Al Unser Sr. Thank you very much, Al, for your time. Really appreciate it. And I encourage everyone to come see this beautiful museum in Albuquerque, New Mexico. KarKix is about automotive history, and most of you know the names Al Unser, Bobby Unser, and Little Al. But we wanted you to know the Unser's history reaches back farther and much deeper than most people will ever get to know. A worthwhile addition to any trip to the Southwest United States would be to the Unser Racing Museum in Albuquerque. You can catch them online at unserracingmuseum.com. That's all for this episode. Join us next time on KarKix.
KarKix is a production of Spirited USA, who is solely responsible for its content. All rights reserved.
Hey, we almost forgot. Join us on Facebook or on Twitter and subscribe to our YouTube channel at KarKix TV. Please rate and review us on iTunes. It'll help us so much. And thanks for listening.